It
Well,
could be an instruction show on doing
Podcasting.
Wow, I
Premier,
wouldn't watch that.
Premier.
Would you watch that? I wouldn't watch that. By the way,
Fair enough.
I can't read that. It's backwards.
It's backwards. It's
Why is it
TameFlow.
backwards in this thing, but it's not backwards in Zoom?
You have the
Anyway.
technology. Yes. That
Yes.
looks like the Book of TameFlow.
It is the
is.
Book of TameFlow, and I started reading it and was instantly gripped and fascinated by the very first section. The whole thing about demand curve versus delivery curve.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just like, holy. And then and then this is where cumulative flow comes from, and here's your time, and this is your thing, and this explain, and it's like the perfect imperfect model to describe what's going on at my client right now.
The wrong but useful model.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like your demand is always going to be higher than your delivery because people want more shit than they can get. And your goal has to be to try to get them parallel, because then you get predictability, and you can do that many ways. You could increase delivery or you could decrease demand. And there's different things that you could do there. Maybe you do a little of both. But what we tended to think of from a coaching perspective was all around increasing delivery. We were teaching teams to be more efficient in the way they did things to bring that delivery curve up through controlling work in process and reducing cycle times and all that other stuff, and thereby pulling the delivery curve into a steeper slope.
Yep.
But we also have to work with the product people and get them to just back off.
Well, this was the Go ahead, Jeff.
So that was that I read that and I'm just like, I gotta at least share this with Matt because you've been pitching this book forever.
That's the part that really gripped me. He said, you're right, to raise the delivery curve, you're talking about stuff that's inherently difficult, expensive. It's training, it's adding more people, it's redoing, right? Whereas if you make the demand curve flatten, right, so that the arrivals match departures, then you have a stable system, first of all, so you can have valid data to measure it. But then also what that means is your work in process goes way down. And what he's saying is you get stuff faster through a stable system with lower work in process. So you actually don't have to wait longer. You have to wait longer to commit the work, to start the work, which is exactly what McDonald's and Disneyland do. You'll get to that.
Okay.
It's a brilliant analogy because it's like you go to McDonald's at lunchtime and you're hungry and the place is super busy. You get in the door, they don't immediately take your order and start cooking it. Right. The kitchen.
No, they cooked it already a half hour ago.
Well, it's an imperfect. There's some quality, but then you have quality issues, don't you?
Right.
Yeah. but usually you don't have time to care. So anyway, but the point is well made. Yeah. The idea of just starting the work later and it's not getting to you any longer and any later than it would have been.
Yeah.
Because what we've done is we're working more efficiently on it now.
Yes,
we'll start
exactly.
later, but we'll focus exclusively on delivery, and you'll get it at the same time you would have if you had forced us to start it at the beginning.
The natural assumption is if we want to finish faster, we have to start sooner.
And yes, and that's not not the case.
It's not true.
It's absolutely not the case. And so that aspect of the book, and just flipping through the book and looking at the stuff that's up ahead, it does look chock full of useful ways of looking at things and stuff that mirrors what I've been stupidly telling people. Well, I'm sorry, ignorantly telling people, telling people from my perspective.
There you go.
Things I believe to be true. And it turns out he wrote a book that says he also believes them to be true.
For slightly different reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With a little more science behind it. Not just my gut feel.
Yeah, I think it's super fast. I think, it's clearly somehow like it's so useful. We're going to have to find a way to understand it and use it, right? Because it's so much more effective.
Yeah.
So let's explore that just a little bit more. Let's say lowering the demand curve is what helps get your system back into equilibrium, a healthy equilibrium.
Yeah.
How do you peddle that? Peddle's the wrong word. How do you sell that to executive management who've been schooled in just push more into the system? Because that's historically what we see is a push mechanism. Just push more crap into the system. Not unlike a toilet. You push more in, guess what? It only goes as fast as it can go. And there is a limit.
Yeah.
And so tell me about that conversation. What does that conversation sound like when you're saying this is a model, broken, but, or, imperfect, but that can work? How are you going to get that implemented? Because first of all, you don't have to sell that to teams.
Right.
All right. Let's face it. They get it.
Yes.
They've been, complicit in their own dysfunction for time immemorial. It's executive management and the top that keeps pushing work into the system. And it doesn't have to be executive management. It could be product management, whoever.
Yeah.
The point is customers want more always. And thus product management wants more always. How are they going to reconcile? Oh, you want us to ask for less?
That was my question. I asked Steve this question, I don't know, a while ago, 6 months ago, and he said basically empirically with data. So he says instrument the teams with the flow metrics, and then experiment with bringing your commitment down, your work in process down, and then your cycle time should go down, and you should get more throughput in the same. And so basically with the science and with the, your executives are probably looking for metrics or data in some function anyway. So just find a way to get one team to do it, and then they proceed based on demonstrating the reality of what happens, the cause and effect, I think is what he would say.
Yeah. I mean, there's you can't, well, it's very unlikely you're going to deliver faster than demand. Like someone is always, I mean, it could happen. But I would argue if you were already in that situation, you wouldn't even be worrying about this. Everyone would be satisfied. So the fact that there's a distinction there, and the way that the curves diverge, or the two lines diverge, it's almost part self-fulfilling prophecy and reflection of what reality is, because delivery is going to be slower than demand. It's going to take time to deliver. We start when we can. It takes time to deliver it. So there's already a separation between the two lines. And then the pace of delivery can be reflective of what's going on, where you watch cycle times are too long. And so they're pushing that line out as you go. And the more things you put in play and don't deliver, the longer that cycle time goes out. So it pushes that line down. So
have you gotten to those the cumulative flow diagrams in the book? That's the part where it really clicked to me, because you can see the mathematical relationships in that chart.
Yeah.
And the area where, when the lines diverge, there's all of this work in process, and it's just wasted capacity.
Yeah.
Right. And when they are closer and they're parallel, then it's the time inside the system it's a mathematical proof almost that it works, if you look at it that way.
And he took the Herbie idea, right? And you're trying to speed up Herbie. So you're taking all that wait time that you're trying to put all the wait time in front of Herbie. And so, right. So by doing that, that's how he justifies starting the work later. It's like, look, you're going to wait
anyway.
There's going to be delays. There's going to be idle time in the delivery because you've got multiple balls in the air. You got multiple things going. Something's going to have to stop and wait. So what if instead of having the stop and wait in the middle, we did the stop and wait first? and then just do
Right.
pure focus on delivery.
Right.
Like
That makes your delivery faster.
Right. So there's your justification for the start and delay, which was just boom.
Boom. Boom. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's brilliant. I really think it's brilliant.
And you can maintain that focus by reducing WIP. Don't give them things. Don't keep redirecting them to do different things. Let them stay focused on delivering that, because we've already spent the wait time. Let's not impose additional wait time now. So
go ahead, Jeff.
So I've been noticing that fly bothering.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I swear to God, it's a real bug. I'm not crazy.
So back to the conversation then, with management. Then yes, effectively using data, objective data, to influence the conversation can have a big effect.
mm-hmm.
That means, though, that you've had time to collect that data. And so that means you're going to have the teams working on all these better ways of doing things, focusing. And then it starts getting into this chicken and the egg, because we're trying to reduce WIP,
Mm-hmm.
and we're trying to increase focus, but you're wanting to have some data to show, to say, we need you to put less in the system right now. And so how much data is enough data? I have no idea, but what you're saying makes sense. But then what's that time interval? So you're not walking in the door, as a coach, say, and
Mm-hmm.
that's your first conversation, or an early conversation. It won't even be the first conversation. But it's not even an early conversation yet, because you don't have any data.
Mm-hmm.
Or are you having a precursory conversation and saying, I am going to spend the next 2 or 3 months, let's say, hypothetically, collecting this data, and that conversation 3 months from now is going to be, I've collected the data and this shows empirically, okay, this is an approach that we should be pursuing by reducing the demand.
Well, if they've got like Jira or, God forbid, Azure DevOps, they've got that, because really all the data that you need are just the flow metrics.
Mm-hmm.
So throughput, cycle time, work item aging, work in process. You should have, and honestly, like if you didn't have a system, all you would need would be, let's say, like the ticket number, the date that it started, the date that it finished, and you could derive all of them from that. So you might have that data on day one. You probably would, right?
Yeah. And there are,
at least for the history.
It
right?
depends on how they've set up their project, right? If all they've got is item goes into progress and then item is done with no differentiation, all you've got is a cycle time there. You've got an overall cycle time. If they've, as many organizations tend to do, given the fact that Jira allows them to create status columns, so they tend to do it. Now you've got transition points. You've got, it went in progress. Here's where it was under development. Here's where it was waiting for QA. This is where it was in QA. This is where it was. Now you've got how long it's spent in states. And I managed. And so I was at one client, they had the status time plugin, which allows you access to the how long it stayed in each of those states and when the transitions happened.
Flow time versus wait time versus touch time, kind of a thing.
Kind of, but if they didn't have something that was explicitly a wait time, then you didn't see it as wait time. Like if they didn't have a status that was a waiting to do something buffer.
Yeah.
Right? But I was still able to look at that and say, here's how long something was in progress for development. Here's how long it was in testing. Here's how long, right? And I got the overall. This is when you put it in motion. This is when it came out of and went toward deployment. And I mapped that stuff out. And I was able to show a representation. How many times did it go back and forth between testing and development? Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a key piece of information. Why is it going back and forth? Well, because tests are failing. So why are they failing? Well, why didn't you do it? Right. So we were able to get the team to focus on ways of bringing that cycle time down.
Yeah, I agree. That's important, but it's almost secondary. Like, well, to Jeff's point, like,
Yeah.
I think what you really need is you need everybody to agree on what does it mean to start and what does it mean to finish. And if you've got dates that are really accurate for each one of those work items, then you can derive all the rest of it. Why is Jeff laughing? Do you think people don't know that?
Because you just said if the dates are correct. And what Mike just explained, yes, theoretically that works. However, frequently, and I don't know, I'm not going to speak for you, but frequently the situations that I walk into, they've got Jira, but it's all boogered up. And my God, there is no way that you could accurately say that any of this stuff represents reality. And so there, in my estimation, are frequently times where you have to spend time just cleaning up the crap that's in Jira, because it's not about the tool, it's the misuse or the lack of use of the tool that just totally sullies the data. And so now you're going to have to start at day one, because all that historical stuff is garbage.
Totally fair. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So maybe you walk in and the data isn't present. So you need to create the opportunity to get the data. You're going to need to observe for a while. You can say, look, this is what we're going to do. This is what I would do. I would say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to track cycle times. We're going to figure out how long work is taking to get done. And we're going to do this as a two-pronged approach. We're going to work with the teams to try and help bring those cycle times down, because as cycle times are brought down, delivery happens more frequently. We can agree that that would be useful. We could even take things a step further. And this is what I did with these guys, because they were doing estimation. So they were putting sizes on things. And if we're looking at the complexity of a thing and we're basing our estimates on complexity, we should logically see smaller things have lower cycle times than bigger things. In general, that isn't
if your
universal
estimation
constant.
Is good, yeah.
But in general, right? But if you're looking at, and we were looking at we looked at their data, and the ones were as big as the fives in terms of cycle time.
No,
something's wrong, right?
Oh, it means maybe the estimation isn't worth anything if it doesn't indicate or help.
Well, but I didn't cast aspersion on the estimate. I cast aspersion on the execution. What was happening that was causing ones to take just as long as a five? And it was the wait times. It was the fact that
I was just going to say it's a bottleneck. There's a bottleneck in the system there.
Yeah.
So even if it was less work, it took just as long because of the inefficiency of the process, is what I hear you saying. Okay. Yeah.
And then if we looked at and Jeff, to your point of trying to find justification for things, if we adopt a rule that says work that we take into a sprint needs to be finished within a sprint, that means it has to be appropriately sized so it can be finished in a sprint. And yet work isn't being finished in a sprint. It's always carrying over. We're always seeing more than one sprint worth of activity. That's a smell too. I mean, there's so many avenues to come in and just attack the problem from.
Yeah.
Let's get stuff done within a sprint. It's supposed to be. Let's see what it's going to take to do that. Now we're within a sprint. We're still seeing a day one, everything goes in motion. And on day 10, everything is marked as done.
Yep.
And yet they're all the same, or they're all different sizes. So how can that be true? And then you just keep coming at it. So you can say, I'm going to be working with the teams to help bring the delivery curve up. But now we need to match the demand curve to their capability, right? Because you're going to keep asking for more. And if we were to answer your request, we would always be putting more and more stuff in play. And you can look at the clients, the fact that they always say, well, the project always seems to take longer and longer the farther we go. Like cycle times are increasing throughout the project. You said they'd get better. These guys should be getting better. How come they're taking longer? Well, because demand is always going up, but you don't increase the size of the team.
You're not
So
titrating the flow work. You're not delaying commitment, I guess is
yeah,
what Steve would say.
right. So the demand is always rising. So the impulse to put more in motion is
Right.
there, right? So you keep shoveling more and more at them, and the few people you've got keep having to take responsibility for more and more, which is contributing to the increase in cycle times, which we can see by how many different stories are people touching simultaneously, if we can look at that cycle time data.
It's almost like the way people think about the problem is a big part of the problem.
Yeah.
Like the model that they're using mentally doesn't match what they're saying or something.
So now I'm product management, and I'm thinking, well, I've got 15 teams.
Yeah. You should put on a different hat.
I like that hat.
What is that? Anthropology?
So do I.
Yes. Yes, Jeff, go ahead.
I've got 15 teams. My demand, I've already promised this stuff to customers.
Well, that was your first mistake, but please continue.
Yes, and exactly. And so even if they buy into this, they're going to say, well, good luck getting me to reduce that demand, at least immediately. It will have to go down the road because I already committed us to delivering this at the end of December or whenever. And we've got to make good on our commitments. So
we have to make good on your commitments, right?
Right. So, well, it maybe
how else might you have approached that commitment then? Like you made the commitment.
It's a learning opportunity. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But regardless, water's already under the bridge. I mean,
okay,
you're not going to change that commitment unless you go back and have the conversation with the customer and say, you know what, I was wrong. Now you've already done this 5 times to the customer, so you've already lost credibility. Here's one thing you can say. I get it, and down the road, I will reduce that demand. But for now, I've got to do this. How about we increase capacity? Because let's face it, guys, that's a lever. Now, if I increase capacity, that means, and the conversation goes something like, okay, so you want to add another team? Sure. How about give me another team of 5, and they'll be our 16th team. That will raise our capacity, will it not? And that's a lever that you can use to help deliver more.
Sure.
Sometime we should talk about this in more depth because there is the mythical man month, right? The idea that throwing more bodies at a problem doesn't make it faster, but in some cases it does. Jeff, please continue.
Exactly. And it depends on, and it's almost kind of nuanced. If you add more members to a team, actually you're going to slow it down because presumably they have a dynamic going, and you want them to maintain that. Well, hopefully if it's a good dynamic, right. You want them to maintain that, even especially as an upward trend. But you start adding people, it changes the dynamic and it does slow you down. But I'm not talking about that. And this is where the Mythical Man Month kind of talks about adding people to a team in the project sense. Yeah. Okay.
And that's disaster waiting to happen.
Exactly.
Unless you know what the ratio of different skill sets on the team is and you add those ratios proportionately.
You're specifically starving for a specific skill that would make you faster, and you know that, right? Okay, yeah.
If that's the case, but odds are that's not what the problem is in those organizations or those teams. Right. But it can be, but
And so you're adding cost,
Yeah.
and you're slowing the project down. Now, that's in that model. But if you just add an entire team, you got a team that just finished something in a different part of the company, itching for some work. Hey, it's a small 5-person team. Hey, can we borrow them?
You could.
There will be some ramp up time. It's a method to add capacity.
So in that situation, you're not messing with the existing thing, right? The thing that's cranking out value. You're not.
Well, you're still constantly trying to improve them.
Yes.
So with coaching, yeah, but you're not gonna throw a monkey wrench into the team,
right?
And try to add people to each team or something like that.
So your approach to adding capacity doesn't change the dynamic of the existing thing. You are just adding net new, separate. Yeah,
right.
That makes sense.
It's the product person saying, well, I don't need to change anything I'm doing because I'm already locked into my course of action. Everyone else is going to change. And you could take your throughput calculation and show ROI is not going to be better because you increased your operating expense. This is not necessarily going to be an improvement. It's going to get you to your date. It's not going to get you to your profit. Right. So one of the things, another way to depress the demand curve, you still give the big bucket. We're still given the big boulders. Like you still get the big boulder, but maybe the boulder is a little hollow in some cases. Like we leave some of the nuances out of the feature. Like
cut scope.
Really get down to the bare minimum of what you need to be talking about delivering to say we've implemented this feature. There's always noise in that. There's always something you could let go of that no one's really going to care to see it go when you really get down to it. And we run in, how many times have you run into this? We're working on a project. The project is running up against a deadline. The product owner, I can't give up anything. I can't show weakness on anything. I can't say that anything is less than absolutely necessary until it's 1 month to the end. And okay, fine. Now I get religion. I will remove some of this capacity. I will let some of it go. Getting them to do that sooner, that also brings the demand curve down. So there's lots of levers we can pull.
Yeah.
Right. And some of them are things we always have been doing. Right. But we didn't know what we were trying to get it to. I think is the argument is we thought in our minds, don't ask for more than they can deliver. But what we're really asking to do is match the demand curve to the delivery curve.
Right. Yeah, I wonder if how often would the product person in this scenario, like there's a discussion to have about how we set these commitments on dates and scope. And there's a conversation about cutting scope and maybe that speeds us up. But like, if you don't change anything in the backlog or the dates, would the product person care if we just changed when we put the stuff into the system, right? If we delayed that, like, you know what I'm saying? Especially in a situation where you've got flow metrics and you can demonstrate that you actually delaying commitment doesn't actually slow us down in terms of calendar dates. They shouldn't care when we technically start or end work, right? It shouldn't make sense. It shouldn't make a difference to them if we have a whip that's huge or a whip that's small, because that's all delivery stuff, right?
Right.
And especially if we can demonstrate that we haven't started it yet, but like, also, that's totally fine. That doesn't mean that your calendar dates are going to slip. It just means that we are making a more efficient process. I wonder how difficult that conversation always needs to be.
Yeah.
It depends. I mean, honestly, there are always other things that are going on in the background. The dynamics between the product management and the customer, or product management and incentives and stuff like that. And so there's always other things at play. But yeah, I think the average or better than average product management person does get it or can get it with fairly good ease, but they're between a rock and a hard place. And
but
we're there to help.
there.
Well, they they were complicit in their own stuckness.
Yeah.
But
not a word.
Regardless, they are where they are.
Yeah, that's right.
And so our job is to help them get unstuck.
100%.
Certainly.
Water under the bridge.
And breaking their arms and their bones to try to squeeze them through is probably not the best option.
Well,
so are there better ways?
Yeah.
Well, so we're all in this together. This is a group effort. The Agile doesn't happen. It's not something the teams only do. It's something that the product does too. It's a coming together. It's why we want business and technology working together on a day-by-day basis. Everybody is making compromises, or everybody is trying to figure out ways of doing what they do more efficiently. If we can get the business or product to recognize we're doing incremental improvements on the delivery side, what can we do to incrementally improve the demand side? And what concession can we get? If you want them to do something better, what concession can you do? Do something to meet them part way, right?
We are all the business.
Yeah. What is it going to take? Like what can we do to demonstrate? Like, whenever they come in me and say, we have to finish everything by December, like, how much goodwill would you buy if you gave them something in September?
Especially if you gave them data that demonstrates that the whole thing is moving on schedule, even though if that doesn't meet the way that they think about it prior hitherto. Yeah.
Like, could you buy enough goodwill to let that your drop dead date relaxes a little because you gave them something that they need right now, right? Now we need to stop thinking about, we have a end date delivery. We have incremental deliveries that we want to bring incremental value such that we can actually start getting something back by putting it out there.
Yeah.
Like this is so, like, we could rattle off a list of 100 things that would compress this thing from both sides, right? How do you prioritize that list? You can't do them all at once. How do you eat an elephant, right? We're going to need to do it a bite at a time. And so let them take a bite, you take a bite, and everybody comes together. And sooner or later, we're going to get to that. God, I hope the math says you can get to the point where they're in parity with each other. And now that they're in parity, the demand is meeting the delivery, and delivery continues to improve. That means demand can now come up.
Right. It's a dynamic system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're not going to convince them on day one, but
no, but nothing succeeds like success, right? When you can empirically, like, give them a theory and data that are consistent, that are moving you in the right direction.
Yeah.
How could you choose not to do that?
Well, the other part of it is that we have been beating the transparency drum from day one.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they can see for themselves on a regular basis that there is movement, that there are commitments that are being not just made, but they're adhering to those, when they can see that teams' behaviors are not this traditional overpromise and underdeliver, that's where that transparency piece really comes into play. They can't see it on any given day. That, I think, helps boost confidence. Yeah. But, there will inevitably be the troughs of despair that they're like, oh, I don't like seeing that. And that's where the transparency can kind of bite you. But you just that's where we come in, and we have to coach them through those rough patches.
Yeah. What does it mean? Exactly. And speaking of transparency, I wonder where they would go for transparency. Do you suppose we might have a room, literally or metaphorically?
It's called a fishbowl.
Interesting.
The transparency room.
Some people might call that an obeya.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, which is, I think, a future topic that we want to get to. I don't know what that.
It sounds like an authoritarian concept.
Yeah, just bow down and.
Are you going to? Yes.
Go to the obey room.
It's not a suggestion.
I have it on good authority from a guy named Jim Benson that I don't know, never spoke to, but it's a thing. It's a place where you can see all the information.
Visibility can be a wonderful thing, and you're right. Yeah. It should be a future topic.
I think it's another fascinating topic.
But at any rate, this is my new favorite topic this week, just because.
I am genuinely ecstatic to hear that. It makes me feel like I was not hallucinating when I saw this and thought it was amazing. I'm super. Yeah.
I agree.
Seems super.
Should compelling. We try to get Mr. Tendon on the phone or on the podcast here or something?
Probably. Don't
Speaking of
hear it from the horse's mouth.
I can reach out to him. See what
and he says. Who are you?
Exactly. Agile coaches? I don't think so. I don't want to hear.
Ask him your question. Yeah. How do I convince them? Data.
That's what he said.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He ain't. I mean, yeah. I don't know, guys. Has this
feels like it's been
an Agile thing?
I've been Matt Beam.
I've been Mike Markey.
And I'm still Jeff Singleton.
And we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.
Toodaloo.
Stop.